If you ever want to understand how two Jews can hold three opinions, study biblical commentary. That's why, as I tell Jewish high school and college students, don't be intimidated if someone quotes a random verse from Scripture at you, because you're never supposed to read a Torah text without a Jewish commentator beside you to explain its meanings within our tradition. Whether that commentator is Sforno from 16th century Italy, Abravanel from 15th century Spain, Nachmanides from the 13th century, Ibn Ezra from the 12th century, or the most famous of all Jewish commentators from the 11th century, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, known by his initials, Rashi. Not only can one word or sentence in the Torah yield 4 or 5 different meanings, the time period in which the commentator lived often sheds light on the interpretation. Now, as most of you know, there are no vowels and no punctuation in the Torah. Take 3 words, just 3 words in Exodus chapter 14. The setting is a scene you know from your Passover Seder. Pharaoh, his horsemen and chariots are pursuing Moses and the freed slaves. As Pharaoh draws near, the Israelites catch sight of the Egyptians advancing upon them. They start freaking out, complaining to Moses they should never have left Egypt, since it seemed better to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. Moses tells the people to have no fear, for God will come to the rescue. And that's when the 3 words appear in Moses' private conversation with God. The first word is ma, why, what, wherefore. The second word is titzak, do you cry out? And most English Bibles complete the sentence by translating the third word, Eli, to me. Why do you cry out to me, says God? The implication is that this is a time for Moses and later Charlton Heston in the 10 Commandments to take human action. Tell the people of Israel to go forward, hold your arm out over the sea and split it. Take the first step, Moses, and the waters will part. But what if you're reading this text from the Torah, feeling utterly powerless when human action isn't on your radar because Jews are getting kicked out of Spain or suffering under the Nazis? What if the only option you see in a predicament like that is God coming to the rescue? And a superb example is Rashi's comment on Ma Titzak Eli. Quick bio. Rashi lived in the Rhineland of France from 1040 to 1105, and he actually earned his living as a winemaker. But like many Jews of his time, he was caught up in defending his faith against Christians at the time who claimed that God had replaced Judaism and the Jewish people with Christianity and the church. And when Rashi was 56 years old, he witnessed with his eyes the slaughter of Jews in the First Crusade in 1096. And he spent the last 9 years of his life comforting and supporting suffering Jewish communities. Now remember, the Torah has no punctuation, and Rashi reads those 3 words differently. Instead of, why do you cry out to me? Rashi places the question mark after the second word. Why do you cry out? Leaving the third word, Eli, a sentence in itself, because a lie, as Rashi rightfully translates, can also mean it's to me, God. It concerns me, God. In other words, it's upon me this matter rests. Upon me, not upon thee. Rashi, who witnessed the slaughter of the Jews of the Rhineland and its after effects, makes totally different sense out of the same Hebrew letters than the way you'll see it translated in many Bibles. For him, it's not, why do you cry out to God? Go for it, Moses or Charlton Heston. That's not what Rashi sees. Maybe if Rashi lived with Christian neighbors in Memphis, relatives, co-workers, and friends who are wonderful, decent, loving people, maybe he would have read it, take human action, Moses, time for you to lead. But in Rashi's day, when Jews were literally being massacred, feeling utterly powerless and hopeless that human history would ever change, Rashi reads it, why do you cry out, Moses? It's on me, God, because there is nothing you can do. Nothing to escape this trouble. We Jews seem to carry inside us a nonverbal script of worry emanating from our history, for understandable reasons. But as a psychologist friend often counsels, that was then, this is now. We limit our potential to flourish as individuals and as a people when we gloss over the different contexts between 1096 and 2017. In 1096, in Rashi's city, the Crusaders murdered 10,000 Jews. Now contrast that with last week when I received heartfelt letters and emails from pastors of leading Christian churches and the president of the Memphis Islamic Center himself asking me to send Rosh Hashanah, New Year's wishes for health and blessing to every member of Temple Israel. We cannot change the congenital worry gene within the kishkas of most Jews, especially among Jews like me who are 50 and older. We have an inherited anxiety based on our parents and their parents' experiences on what could happen if they or we or any Jew speaks up or stands out. Even when we hear how Louis Brandeis dealt with anti-Semitism at Harvard Law School, while we admire his wittiness and brilliance, we hear echoes of stories many of our parents and grandparents related from their childhoods. Louis Brandeis graduated from Harvard Law School at age 20 with the highest grade point average in that school's history. And after other academic triumphs, he was appointed Supreme Court Justice. Eunice Pollock recounts that when Brandeis was studying law at Harvard, there was an anti-Semitic professor named Peters who always displayed animosity toward Brandeis. And one day, Professor Peters was having lunch at the university dining room when Brandeis came along with his tray and sat next to him. The professor said, Mr. Brandeis, you do not understand. A pig and a bird do not sit together to eat. Brandeis looked at him and calmly replied, don't worry, Professor, I'll fly away. And he went and sat at another table. Now, Professor Peters decided to take revenge on the next test paper. But Brandeis responded brilliantly to all legal questions. Unhappy and frustrated, Peters asked him the following question, Mr. Brandeis, if you were walking down the street and found a package, had a bag of wisdom in it and another bag with a lot of money, which one would you take? Without hesitating, Brandeis responded, the one with the money, of course. Peters, smiling sarcastically, said, just like a Jew. Unlike you, I would have taken the wisdom. Brandeis shrugged indifferently and responded, each one takes what he doesn't have. Now, Professor Peters' hate for Brandeis came to a finale when he scribbled on his student's final exam the word idiot and handed it back to Brandeis. A few minutes later, the young Brandeis got up, went to the professor, and said to him in a dignified but sarcastically polite tone, "Professor Peters, you autographed the exam sheet, but you did not give me a grade." Thank God we do not live in Brandeis' age of college quotas or restricted neighborhoods. But let's be honest, fear isn't rational. Even if 2017 America is a far cry from when Brandeis attended Harvard in 1876. Is anti-Semitism and hatred rife in America? You bet. There are 900 hate groups in America. But for the first time in Jewish history, white Christians like Morris Dees of the Southern Poverty Law Center are speaking out against the evil of white supremacy, to become better versions of ourselves, and that's what we're supposed to do the next 24 hours in these high holy days. I think it's important psychologically, spiritually, and communally to get clear on what is and what is not on us to solve as Jews. America absolutely needs to be more aware and vigilant about anti-Semitism. When marchers in Charlottesville chant, "Jews will never replace us." But it really saddened me watching TV the next night, in the aftermath of that evil, to see my rabbinic colleague on all the news networks decrying anti-Semitism. It should not be on Jews or blacks to condemn white supremacy. White Christians need to shut it down forcefully, immediately, and unequivocally. And the same for the removal of Confederate statues in Memphis. It's not for the black community to point out why these statues distort history. When a statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest is erected during the height of public lynchings in Memphis, 50 years after he lost the Civil War, or when a statue of Jefferson Davis is erected not when he ruled the Confederacy, but 100 years later in 1964, not 1864, it was put up in 1964 in Memphis when white Southerners were fighting President Johnson on the Voting Rights Act. It's not on African Americans to call that out. It's on white people to name it, no matter what your politics. The big upside of being alive now as a Jew is the freedom and power we have to make positive choices, shed the fear, and shape a future the world has never known and about which Rashi could never have imagined. Do you as an American Jew really feel so powerless that you cannot affect your own destiny or the fate of helping others? Rashi could only see God saving Jews from the dire barbarism they faced. Today, there's more on us than on God. What else is on us? Internally, as a Jewish community, to name it when the ultra-Orthodox shun open-minded Jews. Why? Because the issue of acceptance is not a problem for those of us who are not Orthodox. Accepting Orthodox Jews as Jews has never been a Reform problem. It's the unwillingness to accept 75% of the world's Jews and 88% of American Jews who aren't Orthodox as full-fledged Jews, and that's Orthodoxy's problem. In America, Jews vote with their feet. In Israel, there's no equal playing field because the state rabbinate uses money and coercion to shut down women from putting on a tallis, much less sing Kol Nidre. There is an Israeli hero heroine, fearless in the face of being spit on and even imprisoned by bullies. Her name is Anat Hoffman. She has been dubbed the Rosa Parkstein of Israel. She protests nonviolently, and she wins in the Israeli Supreme Court to the ire of the ultra-Orthodox. She isn't anti-Orthodox. She just wants Israel to have what we take for granted in the Memphis Jewish community: being able to pray where you want, get married by who you want, and treat women and minorities with dignity and respect, not subservience and coercion. Anat travels to speak in LA and New York each year, and for the first time, 8 weeks from tonight, the day after Thanksgiving, she's coming to Memphis and will speak right here from this pulpit. To be with Anat is to be in the presence of greatness, because instead of putting misogyny and equality on the back burner, using security as the excuse, this teacher in the Israeli Defense Forces reminds us that it is our fundamental values that define who we are and which we ignore at our own peril. It's on us, not God, to join Anat's movement for dignity, equality, and justice for all Jews inside Israel and everywhere. It's also on us to face reality here in America. Most of us are not fully aware how different young adults look today from prior generations in almost every way. What do I mean? The U.S. Census Bureau established 4 milestones of adulthood, and they are not bar mitzvah and confirmation. They are moving out of your parents' house, getting married, having a child, and getting a job. Now stay awake. In 1975, 50% of Americans reached all 4 of those plateaus by the age of 34. Last year, that number fell to 24%. Younger generations are also delaying marriage. Get this. In 1975, 8 in 10 people were married by age 30. Today, 8 in 10 people are married by age 45. In 1975, fewer than 20% of people aged 18 to 34 lived in their parents' homes. Today, 33% do. In 1975, and this is the final stat, the percentage of women ages 25 to 34 who dropped out of the workforce to take care of home, family, kids was 43%. Last year, 14%. That's it, of moms. It's on us to stop living in the past and to face the present if we want a future. What this means Jewishly is embracing a completely new paradigm, one that Temple is raising up and modeling in response to this new reality. The new paradigm is peer-driven, organically formed, and connected to a larger intergenerational family whose expression of Judaism speaks to the lives and values of the younger generations we are reaching. But what's on us goes beyond addressing new Jewish realities and demographics. It's also on us to face last month's headline that Memphis is the most impoverished city of all 53 metro areas in America. Incomes have risen, but poverty also grew from 18 to 19.5%. What's Jewish about this? Listen to these words, not from last year's election. It's from one of our most sacred texts, Exodus Rabbah, chapter 31, verse 12. The rabbis say, "There is nothing in the world more awful than poverty, the most terrible of sufferings." And then the ancient rabbis add, and I quote, "If all the troubles of the world were assembled on one side of a scale, all the troubles, and you put just poverty on the other, poverty would outweigh them all. 1 in 2 Americans today is considered low income or living in poverty. And without begrudging any of us our successes, how can we numb ourselves to that statistic? A group of Temple High School guys, under Teen Director Marissa Baggett's guidance, they're creating healthy menus within budget for food stamp recipients in Memphis so that these folks don't end up with diabetes or other preventable diseases. 4 other groups within our high school at Temple are doing additional projects based on core Jewish values to alleviate the plight of those suffering right here in Memphis because it's the Jewish thing to do. So if all of the above is aleinu, on us, then what's God's role? To remind us that it is not only on God to keep Judaism vibrant or to right the wrongs in front of our eyes. God's role is to remind us that it is not up to God to make happen what you want to happen this year in your own life, in Memphis, our nation, and world. God's role through our conscience and our prayer is to remind us that it's not a lie on God. It's aleinu. It's on us to take history in our hands. I began by recalling great Jewish commentators across the history of our people, so I close with this question. What is the most important moment in Jewish history? The giving of the Torah? No. The parting of the Red Sea? No. The most important moment in Jewish history is right now. Not 20 years from now, not even 10 years from now, but right now. This is the most important moment in Jewish history. What begins now? When we come to see that it is not a lie on God, it's aleinu. It's on us. Amen.